Is there a bubble in the Dallas housing market? Is it about to pop? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today, so stay tuned. Hey, if this is your first time to the channel, welcome, glad to meet you. My name is Wendy Pannell. I am a local real estate broker here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you want to know everything there is to know about living in Dallas, Texas, or what the market is like here in Dallas, Texas, be sure to hit that subscribe button and click on that little bell. We've been in the business since 2007, and we've seen the market soften out, we've seen it speed up ahead, and goodness, we've seen everything in between. Today, we're gonna talk about this question. Seems to be all over YouTube. Oh my goodness, is the market gonna crash? Are we in a bubble? Oh, all of this, fear and interest. Well, I mean, I guess I'd have to start off with, well, what is it that's causing people to think that the market's going to crash, right? What's causing all this concern? Well, it's the housing frenzy, right? It's prices going up at a super fast pace. And we're not just talking just houses. We're also talking, gas prices, basic goods, food, groceries, that sort of thing. All of it going sky high, but really housing. Massive bidding wars, right? And this shortage of housing and prices just going up and up and up. And people are like, man, is this all gonna bust? Is this gonna be a big bubble that pops? So what I wanna do in this video is I wanna bring you confidence. I wanna bring you clarity. I wanna answer your questions. And at the end of this video, I think you're gonna feel very good about moving forward in the Dallas housing market. Okay, so I have a question. Do any of us actually like the way the market is right now? Like the way it has been, right? I'm thinking none of us are happy with the market the way that it is right now, right? None of us would like it to continue this way, right? Because, we're tired of the bidding wars. We're tired of costs going up so high. As a buyer, you'd like to have some options. You'd like there to be a little bit of inventory so you can decide what's best. And of course, as sellers, gosh, they'd like to be able to make a decent profit, but also be able to find something to move in and not be homeless, right? So I think we can all kind of collectively agree that we don't even like the way the market is right now. Right? What we'd rather see, guys, is we'd probably rather see what we saw before the pandemic, a more stable market where we saw growth, but it was slower and it was sustainable, right? So really, when we talk about the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, really, they want exactly what we want. So at the end of the day, really, we're on the same page. Now, we're worried about a housing market crash, but the truth be told, we all really do want the market to slow down, at least a little bit, to kind of get back to a normal pace. Okay, so if we can agree that they all really want the market to slow down, where is this intense fear coming from? Oh my goodness, are we in a bubble? Is it gonna crash? Well, I think it's more the sudden and massiveness of it, right? People are afraid there's just gonna be this sudden drop in value and this sudden crash, right? And I think the biggest fear of all is like, if I pay for something today, suddenly it's worth much less than that tomorrow, right? The home you bought yesterday is not worth what you owe on it today. I think that is the really big fear here, and I think that's, funneling that. I think too, there's kind of this frenzy over the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, right? They're like, oh, you'll see these articles that say it's a spike, interest rates are spiking. Here's the thing you need to know about interest rates, okay? They're actually returning to pre-pandemic levels, which is exactly where they should be. And really, that's where we want them to be, right? Because we said we want a pre-pandemic housing market. We want all of this rage and frenzy to go away, right? And that's what the Fed wants, and that's what they're working on. So really, as we see these rates go up, really all we're seeing is that's really where they should be. All during the pandemic, rates were really low, and that was just meant to stimulate the economy. So I really want to help you bring clarity to the market today. And by doing that, we're going to explore three things. I'm going to answer three questions, okay? First one is, what brought us to where we are now? Second one is, what would cause a market crash? And the third one is, Is it happening? Is the market crashing? Right? And as we go through these 3 questions, I want to do it from like how an economist would see it, right? So we're going to talk about supply and demand, right? We're going to explore that. So tell you what, let's head on over because I want to take you to the Grady Niblo subdivision in Dallas, and we're going to explore it from that perspective. So let's go. Okay, well, we are out here at the Grady Niblo subdivision in Dallas. And why did I bring you here to Grady Niblo? Well, I really want to help you see what brought us to where we are now in the market, a major contributing factor. Now, there's a beautiful subdivision right now that you can see, Grady Niblo. Okay, back in 2007, developer came in and just flattened everything, removed every tree, left it looking like a barren wasteland, okay? There was nothing but dirt everywhere, and then all of a sudden, everything came to a grinding halt, right? Nothing. You know, you expected houses to start going up, you know, you have this big barren landscape that's just ready, and nothing happens. And it sat there like that. The developer went out of business, right? Changed hands a few times. No one ever built here. It just sat here like the ugliest barren wasteland you can imagine. And why was that? Because we went through a major housing crash, right? We were oversupplied with construction, right? There was so much and there wasn't enough demand because buyers couldn't get qualified for financing and all the banks were going out of business, right? So this whole Grady Niblo, which you see around me, and it's just absolutely gorgeous, it was nothing but a wasteland really up until we're talking like 2015, 2016 when construction finally took off, right? So this area sat fallow all of those years. And really the point I'm wanting to make here is there has literally been like over a decade of underbuilding because builders got burned. They went bankrupt. Bankers got burned, okay? They went out of business. Nobody wanted to take on new construction anymore. And that brings us to where we are right now, which is we've got undersupply. All of these years, America was growing, the population was growing, new construction should have been growing. Grady Niblo should have been growing. By 2007, 2008, you should have had a beautiful subdivision. Instead, you had a barren wasteland because we had this big housing crash. Right. So come on to 2020, COVID hits, and guess what? We already have a massive supply problem. It hasn't fully manifested itself, but it is there, and we have a strong seller's market just because, hey man, we went and spent a whole decade without really building like we should. Okay, so we head into COVID, right? We've already got a supply shortage, and what happens with COVID? Everything shuts down, right? We get these stay-at-home orders, so that stops manufacturing. We get whole countries shutting down, and that stops shipping. So, you know, you've got these builders who are ready and willing to kind of bring in that new construction, but the country's telling them, hey, you can't manufacture. In fact, you've just got to stay home. You can't ship, and heavens forbid that you go and actually build because everybody's got this stay-at-home order, right? So suddenly, you know, you had these willing construction companies and you had these developments underway, and suddenly they're handicapped. They can't do anything. And of course, think about what happens when you have a shortage of supplies. All the prices went up, right? So in this time that we desperately needed new construction, we're not getting any. So then the Fed steps in, right? They're like, hey, we don't want the economy to come to a grinding halt, so we're going to increase and stimulate the economy by artificially lowering interest rates. Now, hear me when I use the word artificially, because interest rates are not supposed to be at zero. You're not supposed to be able to get a 2% mortgage or 3% interest rate, right? All of that was artificial. It's not the way it was supposed to be, and it was never planned to be permanent, right? So they lower interest rates. Suddenly, buyers who weren't able to buy before because maybe they didn't make enough income suddenly can qualify, right? Because they have buying power, their buying power is increased. So by lowering rates, suddenly you have more buyers, you have higher buying power, and you have all these buyers flooding into the market. You know, another change that happened is less people were commuting to work, right? So they realized they could live, you know, a little bit more further out in the country. They could have less of a city life, right? So they're all entering the market. So you take a market that already, right, had a supply shortage long before COVID came. We already had a supply shortage. And now we have more buyers. So we're taking supply that's already shortened, not enough, undersupply, and we're adding more demand and more demand and more demand. So do you see how that kind of brings us to where we are right now, where we have this intense frenzy because buying power has been so high and we have so many buyers. But my goodness, even if COVID hadn't happened, we would still have a housing shortage, right? Because of that underbuilding. But now you've got your supply shortages, you've got manufacturers shut down. Okay, so now that brings us right to where we are right now, which is we've got this market that is in a frenzy. Okay, so that explains where we are right now. So let's answer that second question. Are we headed to a crash? What would need to happen for there to be a market crash? Let's go back to that economic principle of supply and demand, right? Because if we're going to talk about a massive sudden crash, then we need to see a massive sudden change to supply and to demand, right? So how are we going to make this big reversal to where suddenly we have this massive oversupply? Let's think about what would need to happen there, okay? We would need, for new construction, that's one source of houses, right? We would need for them to suddenly be able to mass produce. We would need all the COVID issues to shut down, supply lines and supply chains to pick back up again, completely open, all the manufacturing, the distribution. We would need all of that to open back up again if we're going to see oversupply through new construction, right? Is that happening? Does anybody see that happening? Maybe it's happening gradually, but is it going to happen abruptly and suddenly to trigger a crash? Probably not so much. All right, so next source, where else might we get houses for sale that would cause the market to be oversupplied, right? Because if we're going to reverse this market, we've got to see way too much supply and way less demand. Well, you know, another place that you might get it from is from, you know, sellers coming on the market. Let's just say they're motivated sellers. Well, what would cause them to be motivated enough to bring massive amounts to the market? Oh man, interest rates are going up. Now you're going to see motivated sellers, right? No, you're not, because all of the homeowners today, by far and by large, have fixed rate mortgages. When interest rates go up, it's not going to affect them at all. They may be a little more reluctant to sell and buy again, and we are seeing that in the market, that they're just kind of reluctant because they'd have to pay a higher interest rate, right? But we're not going to see motivated sellers as a result of interest rates going up. How about foreclosures? Right? That's what hit it in 2007 and 2008. Massive amounts of foreclosures, and that's what caused an oversupply. Are we going to see that in the Dallas market? Again, no, because anybody who has a situation change, let's just say they're motivated and they have to sell, they have enough equity. Okay, so we're not going to see an increase in foreclosures as long as sellers have more cash, or as long as homeowners have more cash and they have equity in their home. Okay, so all of the ways that could bring us excess supply, either new construction or motivated sellers or foreclosures, none of those are on the horizon, right? So we're simply not going to see a massive sudden shift in the market due to oversupply. So let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about the flip side. Let's talk about demand. Because right now in the Dallas market, we've probably got, 10, 15 would-be buyers to every one house, right? So that's what's causing this frenzy again, is so much demand, not enough supply. So let's talk about what might change that. So let's talk about demand, right? Because again, we're talking about issues with supply and demand. So let's talk about demand, and where does buyer demand start? Well, let's talk about the Federal Reserve raising interest rates, okay? Because remember, the Fed, they're trying to bring interest rates back to where they should be, pre-pandemic levels, right? So they're increasing those rates, and what's going to happen there? Well, if you have a buyer who has relatively low income and not a whole lot of cash, you're going to see them kind of be, out of the market. They're just not going to be able to find anything, which is sad because it's a lot of where first-time home buyers are, right? So we're going to see them continue to rent, right? So you're going to have less buyers. We're also going to see that buyers have less buying power, because every time the interest rates nudge up, buying power goes down, right? So you're going to see less buyers in that way. Who else might not want to buy as rates go up? Well, how about your average flipper, right? Buys a house, fixes it up, and sells it, right? Well, all of a sudden his soft costs just went way up because his interest rate is going up. So he may lose interest in buying and flipping, okay? The flipper may see less of those, right, as interest rates go up. How about the would-be landlord? Well, suddenly he's looking at his cash flow projection and saying, hey, with an interest rate at this level, this home isn't going to cash flow at this rent, right? So we may see that slow down as well. Now, are we going to see enough of this to drastically change the market? Remember, because right now we're talking 10 to 15 buyers in the Dallas market to every one home for sale, right? So what are we going to see out of this? Well, we're going to see really exactly what we wanted to see. Okay, we're going to see buyer demand slow down a little bit. And remember, we talked earlier, that is a good thing. That is exactly what we want because we're tired of all this overbidding. Okay, so that brings us to our third and final question. Is it going to crash? Is the market going to crash? Are we going to see a massive crash? Are we in a bubble? Is the bubble going to pop? Yeah, you've been waiting all this time for the answer, right? And the answer is, has anything on the horizon, is there anything that's going to cause a sudden and severe shift, right? Is there anything there? Well, on the supply side, there's nothing there, okay? There's nothing that's going to cause sudden oversupply. Housing takes time, right? From a new construction standpoint, we're going to see that all of the current homeowners, they're not going to be distressed by interest rates going up, right? Unemployment isn't an all-time low. If it were really, really high, you might think, oh, people would be out of work. Maybe then they'll sell. Even so, they have equity, right? So we're going to see here on this side, the supply, we just can't justify that, yeah, we're going to suddenly see this massive oversupply. All right, so on the demand side, what are we going to see? Are we going to suddenly see a massive drop in demand? Because again, what's going to cause a crash? Supply and demand forces. Yeah, no, we're not going to see that major drop in demand, but are we going to see a drop in demand? We sure are, right? Because interest rates are going to do what interest rates are supposed to do, and that's what we want to see. Now, interesting fact about Texas, and something you need to know as we think about home values, did you know there are 249 people moving to the Dallas-Fort Worth area every day? Every single day, right? So even in a time maybe in other parts of the country, or maybe they see a drop in values, we're not going to see that here because even if we lose some of our buyers due to no longer being qualified, we have all these other new buyers coming in, right? And maybe they're all qualified. Maybe they just sold their home, right? And they're coming in to buy. So as long as you see all these people relocating to Texas, right, you're going to see, I think, a gradual slowing. There's no reason for prices to go down, right? There's no reason. We still have demand. We still have a lack of supply. But what we may see, and what we really all want to see, we want to see this market return back to pre-pandemic levels. And guys, I think you can be optimistic about this market because that's exactly what's going to happen. The Fed is coming in here. They're adjusting interest rates just to help that along. And that's exactly what we're going to see. So if you like the idea of a more balanced market, you like the idea of moving to Texas and maybe having some choices, you know, looking around and, you know, not the next day massive bidding wars, right? Well, stick around. Head on over to Texas because that's what you're going to see. That's where the market is headed, and I'm excited. I don't think we need any kind of doom and gloom about a bubble bursting here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I think we have cause to be optimistic and excited about the market that is enveloping right before us. Okay, so there you have it. No bubble. In fact, be excited because this market is going great places. Tell me, was this video helpful? Do you feel like you have a better grasp on the market now? I sure hope it was helpful. And listen, if it was, head on back to my channel. Lots more videos all about the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We're gonna do some more future marketing videos as well to kind of give you an idea of what's going on in the Dallas-Fort Worth market. And listen, in the meantime though, thank you so very much for watching and have a great day.